Have you ever seen a family completely destroy everything they have just to protect their lazy, deadbeat favorite child? Well, today we have a case exactly like that, and let me tell you, my blood is absolutely boiling. This guy literally paid for his parents' lives, and what did he get in return? Complete and utter betrayal. Let's get into it. My name is Marcus, and if I ever had any lingering doubts about where I actually stood in my own family, they were permanently erased the day I uncovered the will. It wasn't even some dramatic, sit-down moment where my parents sat me down in the living room and tearfully dropped the news themselves. No, I found out entirely by accident. By sheer, dumb, agonizing luck. It happened a few months ago when I was over at their house. The very same house I had been practically keeping afloat over the past 7 grueling years. I was the one paying the bulk of the mortgage. I was the one doing the heavy grocery runs every other weekend. I was the one funding the expensive roof repairs when the winter storms hit. I was the invisible, exhaustible glue keeping their entire lives put together. All while my younger brother, Lucas, did absolutely nothing. And when I say nothing, I mean absolutely, unequivocally nothing. He had no steady job, 0 financial responsibilities, and spent his days just lounging around like a parasite, waiting for life to hand him everything on a silver platter. A platter which, as I was about to discover, my parents were all too eager to provide. That particular afternoon, the air in the house was stale, smelling faintly of old coffee and dust. I was in my dad's home office, helping him sort through a mountain of disorganized paperwork because, as usual, neither of my parents could be bothered to figure out how to operate the new digital scanner I had bought them for Christmas. He had asked me to scan some sensitive documents for him. A massive, unorganized bunch of legal and financial stuff that he needed backed up. I didn't think twice about it. I was just acting on autopilot, the good, dependable son doing his duty. I was feeding papers through the machine, half listening to a sports radio station, until my eyes caught the bold lettering on a thick manila folder sitting right near the bottom of the stack. It was labeled, in my father's unmistakable handwriting, Estate Plan and Last Will and Testament. Now, I am not a snooper. I have always respected people's privacy, especially my parents. But in that specific moment, curiosity didn't just get the best of me. A sudden, cold sense of self-preservation kicked in. After all, I had been the one making sure they literally kept a roof over their heads for the better part of a decade. It wasn't exactly out of line to wonder how things were legally set up for the future, especially considering the vast amounts of my own hard-earned cash tied up in the equity of that very building. I figured I would just take a quick glance to ensure the property was protected, maybe see a 50-50th split that reflected a standard family arrangement. So I opened the folder, and that is when I saw the heavily typed legal words that made my stomach drop entirely out of my body. The realization hit me like a physical blow to the chest. Everything, and I mean absolutely everything of value. The house I had been paying for, their remaining savings, the cars, every single tangible asset they possessed was legally designated to go directly to Lucas. I scanned the pages frantically, my eyes darting across the legal jargon, desperately looking for my name. There was not a single mention of me, except for one generic, sickeningly hollow line in the introduction about loving both of our sons equally. While that was exhausting even reading it, are you kidding me? He pays the mortgage for 7 years and they leave the house to the parasite brother? What would you guys even do if you saw your name wiped out like that? Yeah, right. Equally. That must be why they went to a lawyer and explicitly made sure their lazy, entitled golden child would inherit the entirety of their estate, while the son who was actually keeping them financially afloat, the son who sacrificed his own weekends and vacations to fix their plumbing and pay their property taxes, didn't even warrant a footnote. I stood there in the quiet office, the hum of the scanner suddenly sounding deafening. I felt like the biggest, most pathetic fool on the planet. Here I was, a man pushing 40, bending over backward for them, delaying my own life goals, making sure their bills got paid on time, making sure they never had to worry about putting food on the table. And all the while, behind my back, they sat around the dining room table and planned for a future where I got absolutely nothing. They saw me not as a son, but as a utility. A walking, talking retirement plan that required 0 return on investment. But the betrayal did not stop at the will. If it had just been the house, maybe I could have rationalized it. Maybe I could have told myself that Lucas was helpless and they were just trying to secure a roof for him. But as my trembling hands turned the pages of that estate folder, a secondary piece of paper slipped out from between the heavy legal documents and fluttered to the floor. It was a bank receipt. A very specific, very large bank receipt dated exactly 1 year ago. Looking at that date, a wave of profound nausea washed over me. Exactly 12 months prior, my world had been turned upside down. My parents had called me in the middle of the night, both of them weeping hysterically into the phone. They told me my father had a severe, life-threatening arterial blockage. They claimed he needed emergency, specialized heart surgery immediately, and their Medicare and supplemental insurance wouldn't cover the specific out-of-network surgeon who was supposedly the only one available to save his life. The out-of-pocket cost was $15,000. They begged me. My mother sobbed, saying if I didn't help, my father would die. At the time, I didn't hesitate. You don't hesitate when your father's life is on the line. I didn't ask for medical records. I trusted the terror in my mother's voice. I immediately liquidated the $15,000 I had painstakingly saved up for a down payment on my own home. I wired the money directly to their account the very next morning. For the past year, I had been working brutal night shifts, taking on every piece of overtime I could physically handle, exhausted to my bones, just trying to rebuild the savings I had sacrificed to save his life. I had lived on cheap pasta and coffee, convinced I had done the noble, necessary thing as a son. I picked up the receipt from the floor. It was a confirmation of a wire transfer from my parents' joint account. The amount was exactly $15,000. But the recipient wasn't a hospital. It wasn't a cardiology clinic. It was a law firm that specialized in debt settlement and civil litigation. Attached to the bank receipt with a rusted paperclip was a legal release form. I read the text, my vision blurring with an anger so intense it felt like fire in my veins. The $15,000 had been used to settle a massive underground gambling debt that Lucas had racked up. He had apparently gotten in deep with some very unsavory characters, people who were threatening to break his legs or drag him into a brutal civil court case that would have resulted in his immediate arrest for fraud. There was no arterial blockage. There was no emergency heart surgery. My father's miraculous, speedy recovery wasn't a medical marvel. It was a lie born of convenience because he had never been sick in the first place. They had looked me in the eye, weaponized my love and fear for my father's life, and manipulated me into draining my own hard-earned future just to bail out their degenerate, gambling-addicted 30-year-old son. They stole my down payment to pay off a bookie. And then, as the ultimate spit in the face, they went to an estate lawyer and ensured that the very house I was currently paying the mortgage on would eventually belong to the same worthless brother I had just unknowingly bailed out. Well, what a story. Oh my God, those parents really suck. I mean, faking a life-threatening heart attack to steal 15 grand from your hardworking son to pay off a bookie? How do you even look at yourself in the mirror after doing something so evil? The physical sensation of that betrayal is hard to describe. It wasn't just sadness. It was a violent, suffocating rage. My chest felt tight. My breathing grew shallow. Every memory of the past 7 years. Every time I handed over a check. Every time I skipped a vacation to fix their broken water heater. Every overtime shift I worked while practically hallucinating from sleep deprivation flashed before my eyes. They had played me. They had looked at my loyalty and seen only a deep pocket to exploit. The sheer, calculated cruelty of fabricating a lethal medical emergency just to protect Lucas from the consequences of his own pathetic actions was something a sociopath would do. And these were my parents. I gripped the edge of the wooden desk so hard my knuckles turned white, trying to ground myself. I wasn't just a discarded son. I was a victim of financial and emotional fraud perpetrated by the people who brought me into this world. I don't know how long I stood there, frozen in the sterile light of the office. But the sound of heavy footsteps in the hallway snapped me back to reality. The door creaked open, and my dad walked in, holding a mug of coffee, looking completely unbothered. "Hey, Marcus, what's taking so long with those scans?" he asked, his tone casual, entirely oblivious to the nuclear bomb that had just detonated in my mind. I didn't try to hide the documents. I didn't scramble to put them back in the folder. I slowly turned around. In my left hand, I held the last will and testament. In my right hand, I held the $15,000 debt settlement receipt. I looked him dead in the eye, letting the silence stretch until the air in the room felt thick enough to choke on. "So, this is how it is?" I said. My voice didn't shake. It wasn't loud. It was unnervingly, terrifyingly calm. The kind of calm that comes when a relationship completely dies. "Everything to Lucas? Every brick of this house that I have been paying the mortgage on for 7 years goes to him." My dad's face went completely pale. The casual demeanor vanished instantly. He stopped dead in his tracks, his eyes darting from the will in my left hand to the receipt in my right. "Marcus, what are you doing in my private folders?" he stammered, trying to deflect, trying to seize the moral high ground by accusing me of snooping. I ignored his pathetic attempt to change the subject. I raised my right hand, shaking the bank receipt so the paper snapped loudly in the quiet room. "And this? A heart surgery, Dad? A life-threatening blockage." My voice finally cracked, just a fraction, leaking the venom I was holding back. "You let me drain my savings. You let me work graveyard shifts for a year thinking I saved your life. And my $15,000 went to pay off Lucas's gambling debts?" He swallowed hard. He looked like a cornered animal. But instead of falling to his knees, instead of offering the massive, groveling apology that any decent human being would owe, he just sighed. He actually sighed, like I was some unruly teenager throwing a tantrum over a borrowed sweater. "Marcus, it's complicated," he muttered, looking down at his shoes. "You don't understand the trouble your brother was in. We had to protect him." "It's complicated?" I snapped, the volume of my voice finally rising, echoing off the walls. "No, it looks pretty damn simple to me. You lied. You stole from me to save a parasite, and then you wrote me out of your lives legally. That is the definition of simple." Hearing the commotion, my mother hurried into the office. She stopped in the doorway, taking in the scene, the documents in my hands, my father's pale face, my rigid posture. When she realized what I was holding, her reaction was even more grotesque than my father's. She didn't look guilty. She immediately shifted into her practiced, manipulative motherly persona. "Marcus, honey, please lower your voice," she said gently, taking a step forward like she was trying to soothe a feral dog. "You don't need the inheritance, sweetheart. And that money, well, you have a solid career. You're strong, you're independent. Lucas, well, he struggles. He has a sickness. We just want to make sure he's taken care of when we're gone. You wouldn't want to see your brother out on the street, would you?" I stared at her. The absolute audacity. The twisted, sickening logic that my success and hard work meant I deserved to be defrauded and discarded, while Lucas's failures meant he deserved to be rewarded with my money and their assets. They weren't even ashamed. In their warped minds, this was entirely justified. I was the strong workhorse, meant to pull the cart until I died, and Lucas was the precious cargo. I took a deep, shuddering breath, locking all the pain away in a vault deep inside my chest. I gently, almost meticulously, placed the will and the receipt down on the edge of the desk. I looked at both of them, seeing them clearly for the very first time in my life. Not as my parents, but as emotional and financial vampires. "Got it?" I said, my voice dropping back to that eerie, dead calm. "I am so incredibly glad to finally know exactly where we stand." "Marcus, wait, let's just talk about—" My dad started, reaching a hand out. I turned my back on him. I walked out of the office, down the hallway, and out the front door. I didn't slam it. I just pulled it shut behind me with a quiet, final click. The drive back to my apartment was a blur. I didn't turn on the radio. I just drove in total silence. The hum of the tires on the asphalt, the only sound accompanying the storm raging in my head. I didn't cry. The betrayal was too deep, too fundamental for tears. What I felt was an overwhelming, terrifying sense of clarity. The illusion of family had been violently stripped away, leaving only the cold, hard mechanics of exploitation. The moment I walked through the door of my apartment, I didn't take off my coat. I didn't sit down on the couch. I walked straight to my laptop, flipped it open, and logged into my online banking portal. This was where the actual severing of ties would happen. For years, I had been operating on autopilot, acting as their invisible safety net. It was time to pull the net away. With methodical precision, I went into my scheduled transfers. There was the bi-weekly transfer of $800 that went directly toward their mortgage principal. Click. Cancelled. There was the monthly $300 transfer to their utility accounts to ensure the lights and heat stayed on. Click. Cancelled. Then, I pulled up the secondary credit card account, the one I had opened in my name but handed over to my mother for emergency groceries and pharmacy runs. I scrolled through the recent charges. Dozens of fast food runs, premium cable subscriptions, and expensive liquor purchases, undoubtedly for Lucas. I didn't even blink. I hit the Report Lost/Stolen button and permanently closed the account line. In less than 15 minutes, I completely dismantled the financial pipeline that had been keeping their comfortable, consequence-free lifestyle afloat. Then the silence began. I knew exactly how my parents operated. They were masters of passive-aggressive warfare. I knew that in their house, they were likely sitting around the kitchen table, convincing each other that I was just throwing a massive temporary fit. They probably told Lucas that I was just being dramatic and that I would cool off in a few days. They expected me to feel guilty. They expected that the ingrained, lifelong conditioning of being the responsible older brother would eventually overpower my anger. They were waiting for me to come crawling back, checkbook in hand, apologizing for daring to question their divine authority as parents. For the first 2 weeks, there was absolute radio silence. No phone calls. No text messages checking in to see if I was okay. Not a single word of apology regarding the $15,000 theft. They were playing a game of chicken, fully confident that I would swerve first. But what they didn't anticipate was the profound, intoxicating effect of the silence on me. As the days passed, I didn't feel guilt. I felt liberation. I slept through the night for the first time in a year without waking up in a cold sweat about overtime shifts. When my next paycheck hit my account, I stared at the balance. I didn't immediately have to mentally subtract $1,000 to cover their expenses. The money just sat there. It was mine. For the first time in my adult life, the fruits of my grueling labor belonged entirely to me. The heavy, suffocating yoke I had been dragging around had simply vanished. I spent my weekends reading, going to the gym, and reclaiming the life that had been put on hold to fund their dysfunction. The silence wasn't a punishment. It was a sanctuary, and I was never, ever going back to the noise. The illusion of their independence lasted exactly 18 days. That was apparently how long it took for the reality of their financial incompetence to finally catch up with them. The bills were undoubtedly piling up on their kitchen counter, and the realization that the magical money fairy had permanently closed up shop was beginning to set in. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon. I was sitting at my desk at the engineering firm where I worked, reviewing some blueprints, when my phone vibrated on the desk. I glanced at the screen. It was a text message from my dad. I didn't open it immediately. I let it sit there for a solid hour, my heart beating slightly faster, anticipating the contents. Was it an apology? Was it a desperate plea for forgiveness? Was it an acknowledgement of the horrific breach of trust regarding the gambling debt? Finally, I picked up the phone, unlocked it, and tapped the notification. The text read, "The property taxes are due next week." Wait, what? No apology? No shame? Just pay our taxes. The sheer audacity of these people is insane. How do you guys deal with people who are this delusional? That was it. 8 words. I stared at the glowing screen for a long time, letting the sheer, unfiltered audacity of that message wash over me. I analyzed those 8 words from every angle. There was no, "Hi Marcus, how are you holding up?" There was no, "We really need to talk about what happened." There was absolutely zero acknowledgement of the catastrophic fallout from our last encounter. It was just a cold, transactional demand. It was a command issued from a manager to a subordinate. In that moment, any lingering shred of doubt I had about my decision evaporated into thin air. This text was the ultimate proof. They truly, fundamentally did not view me as a human being with feelings, boundaries, or a right to my own life. I was nothing more than an appliance to them. When the refrigerator stops working, you don't ask the refrigerator how it feels. You just kick it and expect it to dispense ice. They were kicking the machine, fully expecting the cash to dispense. A cold, dark amusement bubbled up in my chest. They really thought I was that broken. They really thought their hold on me was so absolute that they could steal my future, leave their entire estate to the brother who caused the theft, and then casually text me to pay the taxes on the house I would never own. I typed my reply with steady fingers. I didn't use all caps. I didn't use exclamation points. I kept it as brief and transactional as his original message. I'm sure Lucas will handle it since the house is his. I hit send. The reaction was instantaneous. It didn't take an hour. It took exactly 4 minutes for my phone to start ringing. The caller ID flashed Mom. I didn't decline the call. I just let it ring. I watched the screen light up, vibrate against the wood of my desk, and eventually go dark as the call went to voicemail. 10 seconds later, it rang again. Again, I let it ring out. They were panicking. The appliance was refusing to dispense. The reality was finally breaching their bubble of entitlement, and I was entirely immune to their desperation. By that evening, the panic in their house must have reached a fever pitch, because they finally deployed their most useless weapon, Lucas. I was sitting on my couch, enjoying a cold beer and watching a documentary, something I rarely had the energy to do when I was working myself to death for them. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Lucas. Just seeing his name pop up on my screen made my jaw clench. This was the guy who had spent the last decade sleeping until noon, playing video games, and apparently gambling with mobsters on my dime. I opened the message. It was a masterpiece of entitled delusion. Dude, why are you being such a drama queen? Mom is crying. Just help them out like you always do. It's not a big deal. I actually laughed out loud in my empty apartment. A drama queen. Finding out my parents orchestrated a massive financial fraud against me to pay off his illicit debts, and then legally disinherited me in his favor, was apparently just me being a drama queen. He genuinely believed that the natural order of the universe was for me to suffer and bleed so that he could remain comfortable and unaccountable. I set my beer down and began typing, my thumbs hitting the screen with aggressive precision. No, I think you've got it perfectly covered since you're the favorite son who gets the entire estate. Why don't you use some of that $15,000 they stole from my life savings to pay the taxes? You know, the money that saved your legs from being broken by your bookie. I watched the little typing bubble appear, disappear, and reappear on the screen. He was struggling. He had never actually been confronted with the raw, ugly truth of his existence. He was used to being shielded by our parents. Finally, his reply came through, "Bro, that's in the past. Are you seriously mad about the will? Grow up, man, it's just money. Family is more important than cash. Don't be so selfish." The sheer hypocrisy was staggering. It was just money, when it was my money being drained to save him. It was just money, when he was the one inheriting a house fully paid off by my sweat. It's incredibly easy to preach about the insignificance of money when you're the parasite gorging on the host. I shot back immediately. If it's just money, and family is so important, then you won't mind getting a job and using your own cash to pay their property taxes to keep a roof over their heads. Right? Step up, Lucas. You're 30 years old. Be the man of the house you're inheriting. The silence that followed was deafening. The typing bubble never reappeared. When confronted with the actual prospect of hard work and financial responsibility, the golden child had absolutely nothing to say. He vanished back into the shadows, undoubtedly running back to our mother to complain about how mean I was being. I tossed my phone onto the cushion next to me. The battle lines were drawn, and for the first time I held all the ammunition. The next morning, the situation escalated from passive-aggressive texting to outright shameless demands. I woke up, poured myself a cup of coffee, and picked up my phone to check my emails. Sitting right there on my lock screen, amidst the news alerts and spam, was a push notification from my banking app. It wasn't an alert for a low balance. It was a peer-to-peer payment request. I unlocked the phone and opened the app. There, in stark black and white, was a formal request for money. It was initiated by my mother's account. The amount requested was $4,100. I stared at the number. $4,100. That was the exact total of the overdue property taxes combined with a month's worth of the mortgage principal they had suddenly realized was missing. There was no accompanying note. "No, please, Marcus, we are desperate. No, we are so sorry. Can you help us one last time?" Just a cold, hard digital invoice sent to my phone, treating me quite literally like an ATM that just needed the right buttons pushed to spit out cash. They weren't asking. They were expecting. They still fundamentally believed that my rebellion was a phase, and that when presented with the actual, terrifying prospect of losing their home, I would instinctively cave, open my wallet, and bail them out just like I had done for the gambling debt. I didn't feel anger this time. I felt a profound sense of disgust. I took a sip of my coffee, relishing the bitter taste, and calmly tapped the red Decline Request button on the screen. The app asked me if I was sure. I hit yes without a fraction of a second's hesitation. The request vanished into the digital void. It didn't even take 5 minutes for the retaliation to begin. My phone vibrated violently on the kitchen counter. A text from my mother. "Marcus, I know you saw the transfer request. Why did you decline it? The bank is threatening penalties." I typed back, my face a mask of stone. "Because it is not my house, not my mortgage, and not my responsibility. Ask the sole heir to your estate for the money." Another text immediately followed, the tone shifting from demanding to hysterical guilt-tripping. "We are going to lose the house if you don't help us. We will be on the street. How can you do this to your own parents? Family is supposed to sacrifice for each other." There it was, the ultimate trump card, the threat of homelessness. For years, that threat would have sent me into a panic, working overtime, destroying my own health to save them. But not anymore. The spell was broken. I set my coffee mug down, picked up the phone, and typed the final message I intended to send before going to work. I wanted it to be the last word, the definitive end to this chapter of their manipulation. Maybe you should have thought about the risk of losing your house before you decided I didn't matter enough to put in your will. And maybe, just maybe, you should have thought about it before you looked me in the eye, lied about Dad dying of a heart attack, and stole $15,000 of my savings to pay off a criminal bookie for your deadbeat son. You made your choices. Now, you get to live in the house that Lucas's gambling built. Do not contact me for money again. I hit send. I immediately went into my phone settings and temporarily muted notifications from their numbers. I wasn't blocking them yet. I wanted a record if they went completely insane, but I refused to let their frantic, panicked buzzing interrupt my day. I walked out the door of my apartment, stepping into the crisp morning air, feeling a massive, invisible weight finally lift off my shoulders. I was free, but I knew, deep down, that people like them never surrender easily. The war wasn't over. The battlefield was just about to shift. I honestly thought blocking my notifications would give me at least a few days of peace. I assumed my parents would spend the next 48 hours stewing in their own toxic juices, trying to figure out how to manipulate the bank, or maybe, in a moment of sheer desperation, actually demanding that Lucas get off the couch and find a job. But I drastically underestimated their sheer, unadulterated entitlement. They didn't retreat to strategize. They decided to launch a full-scale physical ambush. It was roughly 2 days after I declined their ridiculous digital money request. I was working remotely from my apartment, deep into a complex set of structural blueprints for a new commercial building my firm was developing. My phone had been blissfully quiet. The anxiety that used to tightly coil in my chest every time the screen lit up was finally starting to dissipate. I was actually humming a song to myself, enjoying the quiet hum of my air conditioner, when my desk phone, the landline connected directly to the building's front concierge desk, rang sharply. I picked it up, expecting it to be a delivery driver trying to drop off a package. "Hello. Hi, Marcus. It's Sarah down at the front desk." The concierge's voice came through, sounding strained and incredibly uncomfortable. "I'm so sorry to bother you during work hours. But, well, your family is down here in the lobby." I stopped breathing for a fraction of a second. My hand froze over my mouse. "What? Your parents and another young man?" Sarah hesitated, lowering her voice as if she was trying to shield the receiver. "They are being extremely loud. They're claiming it's a massive family emergency and that you are deliberately ignoring their calls. They demanded I give them the access code to the elevators to come up to your floor. I told them it's against building policy without your direct authorization, but your mother is practically screaming that they are going to lose their home. Do you want me to call building security and have them escorted out?" A cold, heavy knot of pure anger formed in the pit of my stomach. They had actually shown up at my sanctuary. They had dragged their mess out of their living room and brought it into my personal space, trying to publicly humiliate me into submission. They thought if they caused a big enough scene, if they embarrassed me in front of the building staff and my neighbors, I would panic and write them a check just to make them go away. I took a deep, stabilizing breath, pinching the bridge of my nose. The old Marcus would have been terrified. The old Marcus would have authorized them to come up, ushered them inside quickly to hide the shame, and frantically tried to negotiate a peace treaty that ended with my bank account being drained. But the old Marcus died the moment he saw that $15,000 gambling debt receipt. "No, Sarah," I said, my voice shockingly calm, echoing the coldness I felt inside. "Do not call security, and definitely do not let them up to my floor. I will come down and handle this right now." I hung up the phone. I didn't rush. I took my time. I saved my blueprints, locked my computer screen, and walked over to the hallway mirror. I checked my reflection. I didn't look like a scared, compliant son anymore. I looked like a man who was absolutely done being a victim. I grabbed my keys, stepped out of my apartment, and took the elevator down to the ground floor. The doors slid open with a soft ping, and the moment I stepped into the expansive, marble-tiled lobby, I saw them. They had positioned themselves right in the center of the room, blocking the main walkway like an occupying army. My mother had her arms crossed tightly over her chest, her face pinched into a dramatic mask of exaggerated suffering. The classic, disappointed and victimized mother, look locked and loaded. My father stood slightly in front of her, his posture stiff, hands shoved deep into his pockets, his expression a volatile mix of severe frustration and arrogant entitlement. He looked deeply offended that he actually had to travel across town to collect his mandatory tribute. And then there was Lucas, the 30-year-old parasite. He was standing slightly behind them, leaning against a decorative pillar, looking intensely bored. He was scrolling through his phone, chewing gum, treating this entire confrontation like a minor inconvenience. He didn't look guilty. He didn't look worried about the house. He just looked annoyed that he had to leave the couch. They thought they were ambushing me. They thought they had the upper hand. They had absolutely no idea the storm they had just walked into. The moment my mother locked eyes with me, she immediately launched into her theatrical performance. Her voice was artificially loud, designed specifically to carry across the lobby so the concierge and the two residents waiting for their mail could hear every single word. "Marcus, finally!" she gasped, throwing her hands up in exasperation. "We have been trying to reach you for days. We had to drive all the way down here because you are completely ignoring your family in a time of crisis. We need to talk right now." I didn't speed up my pace. I walked slowly, deliberately, stopping about 6 feet away from their tight little formation. I crossed my arms, matching her defensive posture, but maintaining a face carved from ice. "No," I said, my voice projecting clearly through the quiet lobby. "We don't need to talk. You need to turn around, walk out those glass doors, and leave. You don't get to ambush me at my home." My father let out a sharp, condescending scoff, taking a heavy step forward as if he were trying to physically intimidate me. He used to do that when I was a teenager to force me to back down. It didn't work anymore. "Are you really going to do this, Marcus?" he barked, his face flushing red. "Are you really going to let us lose the family home over a petty, childish grudge? Because you threw a tantrum over a piece of paper, I let out a harsh, genuine laugh. It echoed off the marble walls, sharp and completely devoid of humor. A petty grudge? I repeated, my voice rising in volume, no longer caring who hurt us. Is that what we're calling a massive, calculated financial fraud now? A petty grudge? You mean the one where you decided I was good enough to bleed dry to pay your mortgage for 7 years, but not good enough to be in your will? My mother gasped, clutching her chest dramatically as if my words were physical blows. Marcus, that is incredibly unfair. We only did what we thought was best for the family. We have to protect your brother. I tilted my head, glaring at her with absolute disgust. Best for the family? No, just say it out loud, Mom. Best for Lucas. It was never about the family. It was only ever about him. A heavy, suffocating silence fell over our little circle. The residents at the mailboxes had stopped pretending not to listen and were outright staring. Even Sarah at the front desk was frozen. I shifted my gaze entirely away from my parents and locked eyes with Lucas. He had finally stopped scrolling on his phone, realizing that the heat of the spotlight was rapidly shifting onto him. He shifted uncomfortably on his feet, trying to shrink behind our father's shoulder. Look, man, Lucas mumbled, holding his hands up in a weak, defensive gesture. I don't even want to be involved in this drama. I didn't ask for any of this. You didn't ask? I snapped, taking a sudden, aggressive step toward him. He actually flinched. No, you just sat back in the dark and took everything that was handed to you while I paid the price. You are 30 years old, Lucas. 30. And you have never worked a day of hard labor in your pathetic life. His face burned bright red, a mix of humiliation and childish anger. Dude, what the hell is your problem? My problem, I practically snarled. My problem is that I was told our father was dying of a blocked artery. My problem is that I was emotionally terrorized into draining $15,000 of my life savings, my down payment for my own house, to save his life. And you know what I found out, Lucas? I found out that my $15,000 didn't go to a surgeon. It went to a debt settlement lawyer to pay off the illegal bookie you owed money to. My mother let out a strangled, panicked noise. My father's jaw dropped. They had assumed I just saw the will. They hadn't realized I found the receipt. The color completely drained from both of their faces. They looked terrified. Yeah, I said softly, the venom dripping from every syllable. I know everything. You lied about a dying heart to fund a gambling addict. So here is the deal, Lucas. You want to inherit the house? Start acting like a homeowner. You want to be the golden child? Start paying their damn property taxes. Use the 15 grand I supposedly gave you, because I am officially done being your personal bank. I am done being defrauded. Yes, finally. Good for him standing his ground. They thought they could embarrass him in front of the whole building, but he just dropped a nuclear bomb on them. Have you guys ever had to publicly confront toxic family members like this? Lucas looked away, suddenly finding the marble floor absolutely fascinating. He had nothing to say. The coward had no defense. My mother, desperate and cornered, fell back on her only remaining weapon. Her voice trembled as she tried to spin the guilt trip one last time. Marcus, please. He's your brother. We are family. Family takes care of each other no matter what. I looked at her, feeling absolutely nothing. The love I once had for her was gone, replaced by a cold, hollow void. Exactly, I said, my voice dead and final. Family takes care of each other. So why didn't you ever take care of me? She froze. Her mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. There was no comeback to the raw, undeniable truth. My father stared at the floor, defeated. I didn't wait for a response. I let out a slow, cleansing breath, feeling lighter than I had in years. We are done here. Do not ever come to my home again. I turned on my heel, walked to the elevator, punched in my code, and went back up to my life, leaving them standing in the lobby, surrounded by the shattered ruins of their own lies. When you strip a narcissist of their control, they don't reflect on their actions. they immediately pivot to controlling the narrative. Since my parents could no longer manipulate me in private, they decided to publicly assassinate my character. They needed to ensure that in the eyes of our extended family and their social circle, they remained the tragic, long-suffering martyrs, and I became the villainous, ungrateful son who abandoned them in their twilight years. It started less than 24 hours after the confrontation in the lobby. I had just finished my morning workout and was drinking a protein shake when my phone buzzed. It was a text from my cousin, David, whom I hadn't spoken to in over a year. "Hey man, what the hell is going on with your parents? Is everything okay? People are going crazy on Facebook." I frowned, setting my shaker bottle down. My parents were not incredibly tech-savvy, but they absolutely knew how to weaponize social media when they felt self-righteous. I opened the Facebook app, a platform I rarely used anymore, and searched for my mother's profile. The moment her page loaded, a wave of revulsion washed over me. It was a masterclass in emotional manipulation. She had posted a lengthy, multi-paragraph status update, complete with a broken heart emoji and a picture of our family from 10 years ago, back when I was still blindly compliant. The post was a thinly veiled, highly dramatic attack disguised as a plea for familial love. It breaks a mother's heart to realize that the values of love, sacrifice, and family loyalty she tried so hard to instill in her children have been completely forgotten. We sacrificed everything for our boys. We gave them our youth, our energy, and our unconditional love. To be turned away in our golden years, to face the terrifying prospect of losing our family home because someone decided money is more important than blood, is a pain I cannot describe. Pray for our family. True family helps each other, no matter what. Beneath the post, the comments were already piling up. Church friends, distant aunts, and neighbors were swarming like vultures, offering their prayers and spewing toxic judgments. "I am so sorry, Susan. Children today are so selfish and out of touch with reality. Sending prayers. It is disgusting how people can abandon the ones who gave them life. You are a wonderful mother. Don't let anyone make you feel otherwise." But they didn't stop there. My father, emboldened by the echo chamber of sympathy, chimed in with his own post. He was much more aggressive. He wrote, "A so-called family member should never turn their back when you are facing a crisis. We gave everything, and this is how we are repaid. The son who should be standing by us has chosen to abandon us in our darkest hour. Disgraceful." He didn't just write it, he tagged my profile directly, ensuring it showed up on my feed, ending his post with a chillingly passive-aggressive, "I hope you are happy with your choices, Marcus." The absolute kicker, the thing that almost made me throw my phone across the room, was Lucas. The coward who couldn't even look me in the eye in the lobby had suddenly found his courage behind a keyboard. He shared my mother's post and added his own hypocritical commentary. "Some people think being a family is just a financial transaction. They don't understand what sacrifice means. I would do absolutely anything for my parents, but some people are just too wrapped up in their own greed to realize that true love means helping those who raised you. I'm grateful for everything my parents do. I wish certain people could learn what it means to be a real man." I sat at my kitchen island, staring at the screen, my vision tunneling. The sheer, pathological audacity of it all was suffocating. They had completely inverted reality. They had stolen from me, lied to me, legally disowned me, and yet, somehow they had convinced themselves and dozens of other people that I was the monster. They were actively destroying my reputation, painting me as a greedy, heartless sociopath, all to cover up their own massive, unforgivable sins. I could feel the anger vibrating in my bones. I didn't want to react impulsively. I closed the app, put my phone in a drawer, and went for a long, grueling run to burn off the adrenaline. I needed a clear head, because I wasn't just going to defend myself. I was going to obliterate their entire narrative with surgical precision. When I returned from my run, my mind was icy and perfectly focused. I showered, made a strong cup of coffee, and sat down at my laptop. If they wanted to drag our private family nightmare into the public square for everyone to judge, I was more than happy to oblige. But I wasn't going to fight with emotional rhetoric and vague accusations. I was going to fight with indisputable documented facts. I opened a new document and began drafting my response. I didn't rush. I chose every single word carefully, ensuring my tone wasn't defensive or hysterical, but cold, factual, and brutally honest. I didn't want to sound like an angry son. I wanted to sound like a prosecuting attorney delivering a closing argument. Once the text was perfect, I gathered my evidence. I took the photo I had snapped of the last will and testament on my phone. I carefully used an editing tool to redact the sensitive legal and identifying numbers, but left the crucial paragraphs crystal clear, the ones explicitly stating that Lucas was the sole beneficiary of all assets, properties, and accounts. Then I pulled up my online banking portal. I downloaded a comprehensive summary statement proving that over the last 7 years, over $67,000 had been transferred from my personal accounts directly to their mortgage lender. And finally, the crown jewel, the photograph of the $15,000 debt settlement receipt that I had found tucked inside the estate folder. I opened Facebook, uploaded the 3 images, and pasted my text. I didn't restrict the privacy. I made the post completely public and tagged my mother, my father, and Lucas directly. Here's exactly what I wrote. I have been quiet for the past few days because I believed family matters should remain private. However, since my family has decided to use this platform to spread vicious lies and portray themselves as victims of my greed, I have no choice but to set the record straight with absolute transparency. My parents are claiming I have abandoned them in their time of need. Let's look at the facts. For the past 7 years, I have been the sole reason they have not lost their home. I have sacrificed my own financial stability to pay their mortgage, utilities, and grocery bills. See attached bank statement summarizing $67,000 in transfers. I did this willingly out of love, but respect and family loyalty must be a two-way street. Recently, while helping my father scan documents, I discovered their newly drafted last will and testament. See attached document. As you can clearly read, they have legally decided to leave 100% of their estate, including the house I have been paying for, entirely to my 30-year-old brother, Lucas. I was completely disinherited. But that is not why I walked away. I walked away because of a horrific betrayal of trust. 1 year ago, my parents called me sobbing in the middle of the night, claiming my father needed emergency, out-of-network heart surgery or he would die. Terrified, I drained my personal savings, the down payment for my own home, and wired them $15,000. I worked night shifts for a year to recover from it. I recently discovered the truth. My father never had a heart condition. There was no surgery. That $15,000 was secretly used to pay off a massive, illegal gambling debt that Lucas had acquired, saving him from a brutal civil lawsuit and possible physical harm. See attached legal debt settlement receipt in Lucas's name, paid by my parents the day after I sent the hospital money. They weaponized my love for my father's life to steal my future and fund my brother's gambling addiction. And then, they legally left their entire estate to the addict they stole my money to protect. So, to my aunts, uncles, and everyone leaving hateful comments, I am not turning my back on family. I am turning my back on parasites who lied about a dying heart to fund a gambler, while legally writing me out of the family. I have paid my dues in blood and sweat. Now Lucas, the sole heir, can step up and pay the property taxes. I am officially done being their victim. I took a final breath, reading through the post one last time to ensure everything was perfect. My finger hovered over the mouse. With a single click, I hit post. The bomb was dropped. I closed my laptop, walked away, and let the shockwaves tear through their carefully constructed reality. This is exactly what they deserve. You don't get to play the victim on Facebook when you are literally a thief. Bringing the bank statements and the receipts is the ultimate power move. How satisfying was that? The explosion of the truth was not instantaneous. It had a slow, terrifying build-up, like watching a tidal wave pull the ocean back before slamming into the shore. For the first 20 minutes after my post went live, there was absolute silence. No likes, no comments. I knew exactly what was happening. Everyone, my aunts, uncles, cousins, and my parents' church friends, was reading the post, zooming in on the attached documents, cross-referencing the dates, and processing the sheer, unfathomable magnitude of the betrayal. And then the dam broke. My phone started vibrating so aggressively it practically danced across the kitchen counter. Notifications began pouring in at a rate I couldn't even track. The very same people who had been publicly condemning me an hour ago were now pivoting with ferocious speed. My Aunt Linda, my mother's sister, who had previously commented about my selfishness, left a blistering comment on my post. "Marcus, my God, I am so incredibly sorry. I had no idea. Susan told me your dad's surgery was paid for by the church fund. I am physically sick to my stomach reading this. You are a good man. They don't deserve you." Cousin David texted me, "Holy sh*T-man. The receipts. You literally brought the receipts. My dad is on the phone with your dad right now and he is screaming at him. I've never heard my dad this angry." The public humiliation for my parents was absolute and inescapable. Their carefully curated image as pious, loving martyrs was instantly incinerated, replaced by the ugly truth of them being manipulative frauds. People began flooding my mother's original post, not with sympathy, but with intense, vitriolic disgust. They demanded answers about the fake heart attack. They tagged Lucas, mocking his post about what it means to be a real man, calling him a deadbeat, a thief, and a coward. Then came the desperate retaliation from the sinking ship. My phone screen lit up with an incoming call from Lucas. I answered it, putting it on speakerphone, just to hear the panic. "UF ***** Angie Trader." Lucas screamed, his voice cracking with hysteria. "Are you insane? Do you know what you just did? Aunt Linda just called Mom a sociopath. You aired out all our private business. You ruined my life. Everyone knows about the debt." "No, Lucas," I replied, my voice steady, enjoying the chaotic music of his panic. "You ruined your own life when you gambled away $15,000 with criminals. Mom and Dad ruined their lives when they lied about a dying heart to steal it from me. I just turned on the lights so everyone could see the mess. Have fun paying the property taxes." I hung up before he could respond. Seconds later, my father called. I let it go to voicemail. He left a breathless, raging 3-minute message, screaming that I had destroyed the family reputation, that the neighbors were looking at them sideways, and that I would burn in hell for turning my back on my own blood. He didn't apologize. Not once. Even in the face of indisputable, documented proof of his own monstrous behavior. His only concern was how bad I made him look. That was all the closure I ever needed. They were fundamentally incapable of taking responsibility. I picked up my phone, went to the settings, and methodically blocked my father's number. Then my mother's number. Then Lucas's. I blocked them on Facebook. I blocked their email addresses. I severed every digital, financial, and emotional thread that connected me to that toxic black hole. As I set the phone down, the frantic vibrating finally stopped. The silence in my apartment returned. But this time, it wasn't the heavy, anxious silence of waiting for the next crisis. It was the peaceful, golden silence of total victory. The war was over. I had scorched the earth behind me, and there was nothing left for them to take. The months that followed were a revelation. It is genuinely astonishing how rapidly your life can flourish when you stop pouring all your resources, energy, and sanity into a bottomless pit of ungratefulness. Without the crushing burden of my parents' mortgage and Lucas's hidden disasters dragging me down, my financial situation transformed almost overnight. My bank account, previously a source of constant anxiety, began to grow with aggressive health. I threw myself into my work, not out of desperate necessity to survive, but with a renewed passion. Within 6 months, my firm recognized my focus and promoted me to a senior project manager position, complete with a substantial salary increase. I was finally building my own empire, brick by personal brick. News from the wasteland I left behind occasionally filtered through the grapevine. Aunt Linda, who had completely cut ties with my mother over the fraudulent heart surgery stunt, would sometimes call me to check in and inadvertently drop updates. The fallout for them was catastrophic. Stripped of their primary funding source and entirely alienated from the extended family, who refused to loan them a single dime after learning the truth. Reality hit them like a freight train. They couldn't pay the property taxes. They couldn't afford the backdated mortgage payments. The bank, devoid of any emotional manipulation, simply moved forward with standard procedures. Less than 8 months after my Facebook post, the house, the very same house they had so proudly willed entirely to Lucas, was foreclosed upon. They lost everything. They were forced to pack up their belongings and move into a cramped, run-down, 2-bedroom rental apartment on the outskirts of the city. The stress of the financial collapse shattered whatever fragile piece existed in their dynamic. According to Linda, my parents fought constantly, blaming each other for the mess, refusing to acknowledge that their own greed had orchestrated their downfall. And the poetic justice regarding Lucas was the sweetest part of all. Stripped of his free ride, his comfortable basement, and his endless allowance, the 30-year-old golden child was finally violently ejected into the real world. Desperate to keep a roof over their heads, my parents forced him to get a job. He was currently working 40 hours a week as a fry cook at a fast food chain. Coming home reeking of grease, miserable and exhausted. He was finally learning the true value of $1 the hard way. Meanwhile, a year to the day after I discovered that damning folder in my father's office, I closed on my own property. It wasn't a massive mansion, but it was a beautiful modern townhouse in a quiet, tree-lined neighborhood. I stood in the empty living room on the day I got the keys, the afternoon sun streaming through the large windows, casting warm light across the hardwood floors. I had paid the down payment entirely with my own savings that had rapidly replenished once the parasites were removed. There was no tension in the air. There was no impending sense of doom. No fear of a midnight phone call demanding emergency cash. This house belonged entirely to me. Every wall, every door, every square inch was mine. It was a fortress of peace built on the foundation of my own self-respect. I had survived the fire, and I had built a castle from the ashes. Looking back at the entire nightmare, the most profound realization I had was how deeply conditioned I had been to accept my own abuse. For years, I had genuinely believed that being a good son meant setting myself on fire just to keep my family warm. I had internalized the toxic lie that blood obligation meant unconditional financial and emotional servitude, regardless of how deeply they disrespected me. Society constantly pushes this narrative that family is everything and that you must forgive and forget because you only get one set of parents. But that is a dangerous, manipulative myth. Biology does not grant anyone a free pass to exploit, defraud, and emotionally terrorize you. Blood makes you related, but loyalty, respect, and mutual care are what actually make you family. My parents and my brother demanded the privileges of family while behaving like hostile enemies. When I found that will, and when I uncovered the horrifying truth about the $15,000 gambling debt disguised as a dying man's heart surgery, I didn't just lose my family. I realized I never actually had one to begin with. I was mourning an illusion, but destroying that illusion was the greatest, most painful gift I have ever received. It taught me the absolute necessity of boundaries. It taught me that my life, my labor, and my future have intrinsic value, and I have a fundamental right to protect them. I am not a supporting character in someone else's tragic play, destined to suffer quietly so they can shine. I am the architect of my own life. To anyone out there who is currently trapped in a similar cycle of toxic family dynamics, who feels like they are drowning under the weight of expectations, guilt trips, and financial extortion from the people who are supposed to love them the most, hear me clearly. You owe them nothing if they treat you like nothing. Do not let them weaponize your guilt. Do not let them use the word family as a chains to bind you to their sinking ship. If you are doing all the giving and they are doing all the taking, you are not in a relationship, you are in a hostage situation. And you hold the key to your own handcuffs. Walking away is not a sign of weakness. It is not a betrayal. It is the ultimate act of self-preservation. It will be terrifying, and they will scream, kick, and try to drag your name through the mud to maintain their control. Let them throw their tantrums. Let them play the victim. Because once you step out of the fog of their manipulation, you will realize that their anger cannot actually hurt you anymore. You deserve to live a life where your efforts are celebrated, not expected. You deserve to be surrounded by people who love you for who you are, not for what they can extract from your bank account. You deserve peace. I had to walk through absolute hell, dismantle my entire concept of family, and face the darkest, ugliest truths about the people who raised me to finally find my peace. But as I sit here today, in a home that I own, living a life that I control, I can say with absolute, unwavering certainty, the fire was worth it. I am completely free, and I am never looking back. Okay, my mind is completely blown. The manipulation here is sickening. Those parents are literal emotional vampires. They looked at their own son and saw nothing but an ATM machine. Fabricating a heart surgery to bail out the golden child's gambling debts is pure evil. It is financial abuse, plain and simple. And Lucas, 30 years old, doing nothing, acting tough on Facebook? Pathetic. I am so glad Marcus scorched the earth. Biology does not give you a free pass to terrorize someone's life. He built his own castle from the ashes, and they got exactly the miserable life they built for themselves. User AngryPanda99 says, NTA. Marcus is a legend. Blood does not make you family. You are spot on, AngryPanda99. Bringing the receipts is the only way to win against narcissists. User FamilyFirst88 says, Marcus stooped to their level by posting private documents on Facebook. Are you kidding me? FamilyFirst88 stooped to their level? He was defending himself from character assassination. They started the public war, he just finished it.